Hello, Hollywood Times viewers, Judy Shields here. Today we welcome Daniel West, producer from The Morning Answer. Hey, Daniel, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Judy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Daniel and I met, gosh, it seems like, what was it, a month or two already? Time goes by quick. He was at his first red carpet for the Hopeful premiere movie, and he did an amazing job, and we started talking and kind of like what he did. So we're gonna give him a chance to talk about what the morning answer is and what it's like to be a producer and your whole career, what got you into this. So why don't you start it off for us?
Sure. So thank you for having me. It's always wild to kind of share my story because in so many ways I'm doing what I used to do as a kid in my room, and there's almost sort of a disconnect between realizing that I'm doing it and I'm getting paid to do it and it's awesome, and then sort of the same things I used to do back in the day. So that's the really fun part about what I've gotten to do and being in radio. And it's been almost 8 years. And in some ways, I still kind of have the mindset that, yeah, I'm this college kid that doesn't really know what's going on. But then I'm talking to people like you, and I'm looking around and feeling respected and looking around and see what I've done. I'm like, you know what? I have done quite a bit.
So
More to come.
yeah, so like how to get started. I mean, you're just a little kid and it's like some boys want to be a fireman or a
Yeah.
policeman. So what bit you to do what you're doing now, do you think?
Sure. So when I was younger, I think the path is I wanted to play all the sports. And then I got into NASCAR, so I want to be a race car driver. So
Wow.
there's always this thread of sports, something related to sports.
Yeah.
And I played a year of Little League, and it was my 12-year-old year. So in Little League, you only have, up to 12, and then you go to different levels. So I basically just had 1 year of Little League. And then if I wanted to continue, be different levels. And even though I was 12 and an ambitious kid, I kind of had this thought in my mind, you know what? I don't think I'm going to make it as a professional baseball player. And if I continue doing baseball, I'm probably going to be on the bench a lot of times. And do I want that? And I kind of said no, but I wanted to be involved with other things related to sports. And I didn't exactly know what that would look like. So, make a long story short, I'm a man of faith and God opened some doors. And I ended up announcing Little League games for a couple of years. It was probably close to like 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Hey.
And I was homeschooled at the time. I was homeschooled all the way through. And because I was homeschooled, I had the chance to announce and make that kind of part of my schooling curriculum because I could go to the ballpark, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, wherever a game was, and announce. And so this is high school. And just because I'm there, people kind of start to understand that I'm interested in sports broadcasting. I just start to, get in touch with people. And one of the people I got in touch with was Larry Mantle at KPCC, who I'm still in touch with. I owe him an email because he sent me one, and I need to respond to him. But I got in touch with him, and he said essentially, I would recommend going to Pasadena City College locally for radio. So at this
Oh.
point, because I was homeschooled, because I'd been interested in it, by the time I went to Pasadena City College to study radio production, I kind of had a understanding of what I wanted to do and went to school with the express desire. I want something to my name, 2 year program, and then let's go from there. Let's see what happens. And, while this was going on the side, I get more interested in sports broadcasting and really discover, what the really fun part, Judy, even though it's not where the money is radio.
Hmm.
Because I compare it to the difference between writing a novel and then writing like a kid's book. And that's not to say that TV is the kid's book side, but it's the idea that you have this empty canvas. You have an audience who has no idea what's happening, and you get to paint the picture of how he hit the ball or how he made the dunk, as opposed to just kind of putting your commentary on top of the video. So I got super into radio, and the more I got into sports broadcasting radio, the more I realized I really like radio more than TV. So when I went to school, I knew it wasn't going to be all sports, but I knew that whether it was sports or not, I loved radio and I loved audio. And after school, just kind of went from there.
Oh my gosh. So, you have some parents that think about homeschooling. So, how was it for you to have be homeschooled and then go into college? What was that like?
Judy, it was way better than I thought it would be.
Oh.
And I was under the impression that there would be some transition. I remember
Yeah.
clearly the last week before I started school. I remember I had a Nintendo DS and I played so many games on my DS because I had this thought in my mind that it's going to get really hard and you're basically never going to have a moment of rest again because school is so hard. And I remember the very first class I took, it was with a professor who I'd kind of known. We had a mutual friend, but I went in there and it felt comfortable. I
Wow.
felt prepared. And I realized that everything I had been doing up till that point was leading me there so that when I got into college, not only was I prepared, but in some ways I was kind of ahead. For instance, I learned GarageBand, which is the audio editing software for Macs.
Oh,
And when
wow.
I was 15, 16, we didn't have a TV for like a year and a half period. We just got rid of our old TV. And so there's a period where we're watching, if we want to watch a sporting event, it's going to be on the radio, which is kind of also how I got interested in sports broadcasting on the radio. So there's one Thanksgiving where I'm super bored. And instead of, watching the football game, I make up this fake baseball broadcast. I do character voices. And I think, okay, I want it to sound like a radio show. So how do I do that? So I start to go through these different layers of how to edit different things. And suddenly, a couple years of this, I've learned GarageBand, but I don't realize that I've learned audio editing until I get to school and they show me the software. And I'm like, wait a minute, I know how this works because I've been doing this for years. So all that to say, I was really blown away because my parents did an amazing job with homeschooling. I'm grateful for it. But I was really shocked that when I got to college, the transition was way easier than I expected.
So I was wondering, because of COVID, like I have a 14-year-old grandson and,
Yeah.
he had to be pretty much homeschooled. And I remember what a struggle it was for his mom and me sort of being there too, and so maybe I know you have so much to do, but it sounds like maybe you should do some kind of programming to help those parents who want to homeschool those kids because they always think that's such a taboo thing. And it sounds like you're the prime example of how it can work and then go right into college. So you need to do something to help all of the parents out there.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm totally open to, talking with people. And I think quickly on the homeschool part, I think one of the misconceptions is that it's a certain way. And I
Okay.
think the real beauty of homeschooling, and I'll be honest as well, in some ways, some of the detriments that people kind of see homeschooling from the outside, they're like, ugh, is the idea that it's tailored specifically to every kid. So it really is on the parent. So if you're a good parent and you know your child, then it'll be a great experience. And yeah, there are guidelines to follow, but how you get there, it's kind of based on the student. I was a learner who I loved reading growing up. So
Yeah.
a lot of the ways that I learned was through history. And then I start to look and say, oh, okay. So when we went through studying all the books about the US presidents, and then we bounced off into the Civil War, suddenly I get this picture of American history, but it wasn't, let's go through a textbook of all of American history. It was, here are some stories of people, let's, go into different places. So that's the part that I think can be overwhelming. But if you know your child and you
Yeah.
know how they learn, you spend enough time around them, I think that the homeschooling can become less intimidating because it really is just sort of what's the best way for my child to learn this. And the last thing I'll say about that, because I'm sure you have a lot more to say, besides homeschooling,
Yeah.
but the thing I'm most grateful for is the idea that homeschooling teaches the students how to learn. And if you start there, you can
Yeah.
go anywhere. So I never really studied for tests, but I was a pretty good test taker, both in some kind of proficiency exams and things that I took leading into high school or in high school or before college and in college, because I had a love of learning. And if I enjoyed learning, yeah, I'm going to take notes naturally. And if I take notes and I pay attention because I like learning, then yeah, I'll probably do pretty decently in a test because I'm just remembering what I learned. And so I never got stressed over tests or finals or midterms because it was really more about the process of learning than it was about the test. And I think that's the
Um,
other thing too, is how will they do in testing? How will they do? If they just learn and they know how to learn, not only will school and testing feel easier, but maybe outside of school, they'll still be interested in learning different things. Like I go on Wikipedia all the time.
yeah.
And even in my job and different things, I'm always still learning. And I realized a lot of that came from when I was homeschooled.
Well, thank you for that. That's some great information.
Yeah.
So, like radio and you becoming a producer, tell us what is the morning answer? What show is that?
Sure. The Morning Answer, it's a news talk show in Los Angeles. So the idea is it is it's a bit political, wherever people are on the political spectrum, but the thing that I enjoy about working with the host Jen and Grant and just the atmosphere is we try to have some fun with it. There are different ways to, make the meal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's topical news at the same time. We have a little bit of fun, have different guests on, but it's really about sort of delivering news, but also delivering it in a way that there's a sense of hope and there's a sense of joy that, hey, everything might not be going perfectly wherever you are on the political spectrum. I think we can look at LA and this area and say, you know what, there's some things that could be improved on, but how do we get there? How do we make things better? And how do we do it with a sense of optimism in some ways, and just also just enjoying each other. I think that's what makes any radio show good, is if you just want to hear what the people have to say, if you feel like you know them and you just want to come and kind of hear their thoughts on whatever, then I think that's a good show.
So explain to me, as a media person, the
Yeah.
difference between like radio today and podcasting that everybody's doing. What's
Ooh.
the difference? You know what I
Ooh,
mean?
that's a good question. I think the main difference at this point is the structure.
Okay.
I think the two can coexist. I think there's this misconception that, radio is dying, or I think what happened is you have radio and you have podcasting have formed into audio, and the audio medium isn't dying. So I think the good thing about radio that sometimes can get a little lost in podcasting is the structured format. I think just because you have a podcast doesn't mean that, you just 3 hours open the microphones and just talk. I think that it helps if you have somewhat of a structure. So the way the show works in our case, we have four segments an hour or so, and so it gives the show some form. So
Yeah.
this segment, yeah, every Thursday we have kind of like a fun news segment at the end of the show, or it allows us to take breaks. It allows us to kind of reconvene, or a little bit of improv, which I've done a little bit. So I think that's the biggest difference between podcasting and radio, is just sort of how it's structured, and whether you're doing both. I think there are things that you can learn from either side. I think radio could learn from the relaxed atmosphere of podcasting, because I think the less you have the sort of veneer of I'm broadcasting and more of just we're having a conversation. I think that's important, but I also think podcasting could learn a little bit from the idea that it is good to have structure. It is good to have a sense of, even if it isn't live, sort of the high wire of acting a little bit like it's live, because I think there is something that I really appreciate about the live radio idea, that if things go wrong, you just kind of keep rolling with it, or there's no stops, there's no breaks. So the two can coexist, but I think those are the biggest differences.
And so how did you get into the producing role, from like wanting to do radio to like the produce?
Sure.
What do you do as producer on the show?
Sure. So first off, how did I get there? So once I'm done with school, I actually got a job already at the company I work for, because one of my professors, he was a producer on a different show. So we have a bunch of different stations that are a part of this one company. And so once I was done with school with the 2 years, I said, well, I already have a job. I and at this point I say there may be a point in my life where I need more education for what I want to do, but let me see how far I can go just where I am now, because that's kind of the goal at the end of the day with a lot of college, right? It's just trying to get a job.
Yeah.
So I started midnight to 8 a.m. in the overnights, and I just kind of let my bosses know, hey, I'm available now that I'm done with school, and essentially just said yes to a lot of opportunities. And it goes from overnights to I'm working a little bit earlier in the day and a few more days a week till full time on the overnights, to phone screening for a show, and then from phone screening to a show to having an opportunity to be the engineer, which means that I'm in charge of picking music and running the board for the show and everything like that. And then a couple years ago, I worked for awesome lady Katie, who was the producer before me, and she decided it was time to move on, and I was there kind of running parts of the show, so I kind of took on the other responsibilities at first I was a little bit nervous about, but I've kind of kind of worked in. Uh, so there's that side. So as far as like what a producer does, it varies throughout radio. I think is kind of it depends from show to show. Actually, what a producer is varies. So in my case, I'm also the engineer, so I run the show. So if there are any audio errors, you can blame me. No, I'm kidding. But so I, get to pick music during the show, kind of the flow of the show,
Wow.
things like that. But the other part is, booking guests or coming up with
Mm.
segments or things like that. And it's a team effort. I don't do it alone. We've got awesome people who kind of get the show. Here's some of the news stories of the day, and they send it out. So in some ways, it's a lot of managing, but it's just a lot of fun because at the end of the day, even though I get to wake up super early, I get to hang with some awesome people for 3 hours, and we're
Yeah.
talking in between breaks. And in some ways, the show in between the breaks is just about as much fun as is on the air.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of us, I'm in my 60s. So, you go to school, you're in your career, you're kind of just in it. And I started to fall into interviewing this stuff a few years ago, and I really like it and want to go further with it once I retire. So where do you see yourself? I mean, you're doing what you do now. Are you having visions? What's your goals in life? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I will continue. This is kind of a broad question. I think I will continue to say yes because saying yes, got me to here. So I've had more opportunities because I produce the morning show, but there's also an afternoon evening show on one of our sister stations that one of our hosts on the morning show, Jennifer Horn, does. And she's asked me to come on kind of at the start of the year. Hey, for the final segment of the show, do you want to come on and share your thoughts? And I'm like, sure. And so through that, I became more comfortable being on air, which is something I've always wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
I enjoy being on air, but also wanting to be good at it. I just didn't want to do it if I wasn't good. So there's that side of it. With another one of our sister stations, I've gotten a chance to be essentially like an on-air DJ. I'm on a Christian talk station talking, in between programs and things like that. So I think broadly speaking, just saying yes and more opportunities to do things on air, because that's what I'm interested in as well. But, ultimate dream. And I'm not sure quite how the paths are going to cross because sports broadcasting, there are a lot of different ways to get into it. And it's a rather kind of niche field, but I would love to do play-by-play broadcasting, Major League Baseball on the radio. But I think any level of baseball would be so much fun because that's my favorite sport. And I think that the fact that I enjoy other sports and kind of the way that I approach sports means that I could make baseball kind of even more fun than I think it already is if I got a chance to announce it. So that's
Nice.
down the road, but I'm at peace with it. When I got out of school, I was like, oh, I got to be an announcer. And now I've just kind of calmed down and God's opened doors. But, so I'd say broad view is just doing more things on air. And then I think the ultimate, dream job would be some kind of play-by-play baseball on the radio. That'd be fun.
That's so cool. Well, so like how we met was you doing your first red carpet. Did you like it? Are you gonna kind of do more? Where does, is that gonna be a little segue for you?
That was a lot of fun. I don't know if my future is there full time.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what to expect. So definitely there's some notes about, what I want to do in the future and, what to do with the material once I get it on the other end, because I had a bit of, a turnaround with the
Yeah.
show and everything like that, kind of letting them know. But I mean, I'm really just open to just about anything. I think that's the big key is that if I had advice to give to young people, is just say yes.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that you completely ruin your life and just go crazy with like, oh yeah, I got to do everything. But no, but just be open and say yes to a lot because, going back to sports broadcasting, baseball is my favorite sport. But when I was at Pasadena City College, they had a full football season. And so I announced football games or
Oh, wow.
basketball games. And I didn't just say, okay, well, it's not baseball. I don't want to do it. So I think
Yeah.
the idea of the more things you say yes to, the more versatile you are. And then you can go and say, hey, I know how to do this. I know how to do that. And even if it's not something that you find passion with and you say, I'm going to do this the rest of my life, at least, if nothing else, you have respect for the people who do it. And there might be a point down the line where you just pull that out of your tool bag and say, hey, I did this in the past. I might know how to do it.
So do you have mentors that you work with now or people you want to work with down the road?
I do. I do. There's some people who I work with, Jennifer Horn and Grant Stinchfield, the two people who I work with on the show. They're awesome. And I've learned a lot from, just being around them and kind of seeing how they operate. And yeah, there's some people here at the station as well, because it's a small as far as, everyone kind of knows each other. But as far as, the stations, it's a pretty big place. So I've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people over the years. And yeah, there's another guy, Sean, who's a technical director and engineer on some of the national shows, who's a big influence. So
Wow.
yeah, just kind of taking a lot of notes and getting advice wherever I can.
So is it an actual brick and mortar, or you guys work remote? How does it work for you?
Yeah, it's brick and mortar. It's yeah, we got studios in Glendale and
Nice.
one kind of narrow hallway, which I appreciate because no matter who's walking through the halls, it feels kind of homely, like, oh yeah, and not homely in a bad way, but it feels like
Right.
home, like a community, like, oh
Yes.
yeah, there's so and so, it's
Aw.
that kind of atmosphere. I almost kind of relate it jokingly to well, now it's crypto.com arena, but Staples Center, as far as you have a lot of events going on
Yeah.
where you're switching over. We have one studio that has a couple shows, so we'll switch over and change the lights and change out everything. So
Nice.
there's a lot being produced out of the building.
Wow. So what's a day like in Daniel's get up in the
Ooh,
morning and I get to go
that's a
to
good
bed?
that's a good question. I joke and say it kind of depends on the day, but overall, get up and get into the office and kind of take a look at the audio, or not take a look, but take a listen to the audio, because that's
Yes.
kind of the backbone of the show is playing audio. What happened the night before? What kind of news do we have? What's the audio that'll be fun for the host to react to? What will be fun for possible comedy down the line, or for different guests we might have on? So we have that, setting up, and then once that show's done, produce the afternoon evening show, and then I edit that one, and then do the work for the overnights on the Christian station, doing tracks there, and then in between, then sometimes while I'm on the morning show, getting guests ready or editing audio or voicemails or different things like that. So kind of
Yeah.
based on the day, the hour, it varies a little bit, and then we have special events coming up, so let's get ready for that, that kind of thing.
Nice. Nice. Do you have hobbies to keep you busy, night times or weekends that you like to do?
Probably not as many as I should, but part of that's just because when I'm done, I kind of want to go home and sleep.
Sleep,
um,
right.
yeah, sleep is a hobby. No, I don't know how much of a hobby it is, but I do love driving. Like, this area of Southern
Yep,
California is
right?
is a lot of fun to find all the back streets. I kind of have a game of mine where if I get bored, if I feel like life is just, too plain, I'll just
Yes.
find a new way to get home. And so through that way, I've kind of explored the mountains of Glendale and different places
Yes,
and kind of
right.
gone around. So I've got, that's what driving's one. Archery. I've been involved in
Oh,
archery since I was 13. My dad took me
cool.
out on my 13th birthday. So I do that. And then I know it's kind of stereotypical, but I am a bit of a video gamer.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
but I jokingly say I try to put my mind into it. So I'll take a sports game and change all the teams. I did a project that was way too long and it didn't really do anything, but I said I got a baseball game, Major League Baseball, official baseball game. You could change the team names, and I changed them all to hockey teams. Why? Just because I felt like it. So it's things like that, or playing as a manager or something. So
Wow.
even when I'm gaming, I try to make sure that I'm not just sitting in front of a TV, just pressing buttons. I try to make it fun.
So do you have a personal social media, or how do we find your show?
I do. So the best way to find the show is we have a Twitter account at This Is TMA, Twitter X account at This Is TMA. You can see ways to watch the show there, and you can find links to our website where you can find the podcast, all that. My personal one that I use the most is at Dan West Radio on Instagram, where I have done a little bit of a podcast that kind of went dormant because, again, when I get home these days, I don't exactly want to make more content. But I do some kind of comedic stuff there. I've been interested in voice acting and improv kind of through high school and different times like
Nice.
that. Some friends of mine encouraged me because I just do voices for fun. My dad, he wasn't a voice actor, but he did voices, and my mom did voices when I was growing up,
Well,
just to entertain me as a kid, and it passed down to me. So at
nice.
Dan West Radio, you'll see me in character there sometimes, might see some little cartoon things, or just, my life.
Sounds awesome. We'll make sure we get those links
Yeah,
up. Anything
sure.
else you want to, like, what else are you working on besides your show every day? Anything else coming up?
Ooh. Yeah, I'm thinking about relaunching the podcast. And I don't like to constantly say, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I'm thinking about it. But there's some strong considerations right now. And it's kind of the question of, once I do it, how do I maintain it amidst my schedule, but
Yeah.
also how do I make it fun and how do I make it unique? Because I don't just want to do something just to do it. I think whatever I want to do, I want it to have the stamp of, this is something that someone put effort into, that has a little bit of personality, that'll make
Yeah.
you laugh a little bit. So the first go around with the show was a lot of fun. It was essentially a fake sports talk radio show that I did for a few years. And then kind of when 2020 and sports weren't quite happening as frequently, it kind of stopped and I never quite got back on. But I'm cooking up a couple of ideas and I'm working through some things. I'm like, you know what? I've got some ideas. I think that's the next big thing on the horizon is figuring out how to relaunch that.
All right. Well, we'll get this up for you on YouTube and get it out there for your social media and keep in touch when you have that podcast up and running and
Okay.
you can have us on there.
Okay. Sounds good.
But we
All right.
appreciate you taking the time, and it was a great honor to meet you back when we did, and we will have to keep in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Judy.
You're welcome.